Hi, my name is Constance Slider-Pierre. I'm the organizing director at TURN, the Utility Reform Network. The critical thing to remember is that public investment isn't something that's new. What is new is the intention to making sure that public investment actually ends up in the hands of all the public. Most public investment, despite a lot of myth and popular belief, does not end up in the hands of those who actually need it. And many communities are not getting their fair share, who deserve it.
Those who have tried to navigate community economic development know that the world of public investments can be a confusing mess of different funding streams, politics, and lots of competing interests. Most of the times, community organizations that are closest to the communities that should benefit from these funds get passed over in favor of developers or large organizations with substantial budgets and key political connections. Historically, publicly funded economic development projects reflect the racism, classism, and xenophobia that exist in our country. Neighborhood revitalization initiatives have often been code for harmful practices like redlining, eminent domain, displacement, and predatory lending. The result has been fragmentation, concentrated and racialized poverty, and policies that have perpetuated racial and class-based disparities.
So Charging Faith is the project that we've been funded to work on. It's a project that will allow us to work in community with Black churches in California to really advance their knowledge on some of the access points for capital or public funds that are available to really work on things like electrification, community resiliency programs, and engagement in some of the processes that happen, particularly at the regulatory level, where communities, particularly communities of color, are often left out of those decision-making spaces. One, because they don't have the technical assistance that they need. And so what makes this project unique is that we are intentionally providing the resources, the education, and listening to the community on what it is they need. Why haven't these funds ended up there? How can we support that?
My work at TURN is to evaluate all of our internal and external policy positions for their race equity impacts. We've been working on closing the digital divide both at the state level and the federal level by engaging with the California Public Utilities Commission as well as the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC. As mandated by the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the FCC has been tasked with preventing and eliminating digital discrimination, and they've looked for public input as to how to define discrimination. We work, again, at the state and federal level to try to address that. One of the primary ways that we've done that is engaging at the Public Utilities Commission to influence the spending of federal dollars, which have been classified for infrastructure. We've particularly intervened in something called the Federal Funding Account, which is meant to build out last mile infrastructure for broadband, the piece of wire that goes from the center to your home. The CPUC put out a map that showed the priority areas for investment of these public dollars. And across the board, what was highlighted were the richest, least environmentally polluted, and whitest communities in the entire state. Through TURN's advocacy in partnership with other community-based organizations, we reacted. We intervened at the CPUC, and we were successful in getting the priority map rescinded, remade, and republished to properly reflect where these public dollars should go in underserved and disadvantaged communities.
So, what does government investment in economic development typically look like? How do things get to be so inequitable? In the traditional economic structure, money can come from federal, state, and local government budgets and through several, and sometimes competing, departments within these governments. This funding is often linked to election cycles and particular industry or government outcomes. This often results in lengthy bidding and contracting processes with agreements specifically linked to legislative or otherwise political priorities. While these processes may be designed to be competitive, they, in reality, are based on political connections and access. However, because public money comes through a public process, local communities can, and do, organize to influence the direction and amounts of funding coming to local communities.
My name is Sahara Huazano. I'm the Senior Director for Alianza Coachella Valley. What we do at the Coachella Valley is that we organize with community to make sustainable changes to have a better future. We're at the forefront where community is now creating ideas for project-specific ideas that will mitigate a lot of the issues that we have in our community. The projects came into fruition in our community after many years of collecting information via canvassing, door knocking, making phone calls, having community meetings, and the most fruitful conversations that we've had were informal ones where the youth put together a music festival called the Hue Music and Arts Festival, where people were able to celebrate each other and at the same time talk about the issues and priorities that they would like for us to focus on in the community.
With the Solidarity Economics framework, it is important to note that the goals of public funding are not possible without ongoing, persistent, and intentional efforts by community members and organizations to make sure funds are allocated to directly support the projects that will provide the greatest impact to their communities.
Part of our work, one quick example, was the pavement of mobile home parks, where a lot of the farm workers, that's the type of housing that they have, and we were facing issues around high levels of asthma, high levels of obesity, high levels of the trailers burning down and not having emergency vehicles go into the mobile home parks because there was no pavement. It was just dirt road, and because of the advocacy that we made through our local air district and with our county district, we were able to allocate public dollars to go into the mobile home communities. We paved around 38 mobile home parks out of 120, and it changed the life night and day. People felt a sense of pride. They felt that they were worth something, that they were worth the investment, and that was amazing. People were starting to ride bikes outside because many of the children, when they would come back from school, because the soil was so contaminated, that they would prefer their kids to stay inside the mobile home instead of being outside. And that's a very different idea of when we think about children being outside. Our children couldn't be outside because we didn't have pavement. So now we do have it. They're roaming around in their bicycles, their scooters, their skateboard. Las señoras, which are the older women, have Zumba classes outside because they know that they can stomp basically and not lift up the soil that would be really bad for their lungs. The community understands that we cannot focus on everything and except for us to get results. So that's the way Alianza functions in a matter of a campaign. We let the community decide hey, what are our priorities? And we facilitated the conversation. And then from there, we provided the tools. How we navigated our relationship with public agencies is in a matter of welcoming them to our community. Many of them, we understand that there is a change of staff, a change of leadership, and we take the opportunity to use the restorative justice way to address our conversations, to increase trust between the government entity and our community. So what we do is that we actually create tours where we invite them and have the community give them a tour and have a meal together. Sometimes we can advance a lot of things much faster than having formal community meetings and not being able to get over their own challenge of their absence in the communities that are underserved. But we see that it's really easy when we see each other at the same level and having a meal and discussing, not just focusing on the challenges, but how we can solve them.
A solidarity economics approach considers everyone as whole people, contributing to this mutually beneficial process of strengthening a community in service of a stronger community and a stronger economy. It aims to connect rather than separate communities. Solidarity economics emphasizes the need for mutuality, relationship, and trust in healthy economic systems. Funding and policies would be used to build and maintain these connections, strengthening economies at the neighborhood, city, and regional levels. On a greater scale, it creates long-term and trusting partnerships between those in the community and those in government agencies. At the same time, a solidarity economics approach uplifts economic development projects with an eye towards creating equity and correcting the impact of race-based policies. It aims to strengthen rather than depleting or displacing community members and resources.
My name is Mary Vang. I work for Mutual Assistance Network. I'm their Economic Development Coordinator. And what I do is, a lot of community engagement. I am a community resident in the Paso Heights. And so I was approached to be a part of their team, which will be engaging with community members within my own community groups, as well as my circle of networks.
So in the late 1990s, HUD gave a grant, a $10 million grant to the Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency. Within Del Paso Heights, there were several parcels of vacant land, originally slated for an infill housing development project. The $10 million investment allowed for the developer at the time to do site-level development, such as putting in sidewalks, sewers, and renaming the streets after local neighborhood leaders. The developer was able then to develop first 4 phases of the project. Then in the late 2000s, with the economic downturn, the developer was no longer able to continue and finish the project. The land sat vacant until 2015, in which a new developer was able to acquire additional funding from Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Agency and additional financial institutions to make the project come to fruition.
When public funds are used to invest in a community's assets, our economic systems as a whole are strengthened. The benefits of this approach are immediately apparent and set the stage for robust economic growth and development.
For us as an organization, it allowed us to further our economic development work, allowed us to build upon our existing work. We had already had trusted relationships with community residents for us to really help our mission and vision for the community come further into fruition. Public investment was superbly important because without it, these projects won't happen. Private developers won't come into the communities unless they see other development, and it can be a catalyst for future development.
MAN and Pacific Housing serve as a perfect example of what it looks like when funders, public agencies, and community organizations come together to put forth public investment projects using a solidarity economics framework.
The partnership between Pacific Housing and MAN was created that we went in with a common goal to put together a proposal and a response to SHRA in order to win this 91 home development and get started. It then created this community partnership that we did community outreach, community education. They helped do first-time home buyer classes and courses that we could promote the project and also educate buyers that felt they could not afford a home or they couldn't save the money to get there, get the down payment help. And that helped, there were educational classes that enlightened the community. And that was part of the partnership with MAN, and that's what MAN really excelled in bringing the community to us. And we in turn have helped them with the Del Paso Heights Sports Complex and things that MAN has been spearheading and getting off the ground. So Pacific Housing has enjoyed is a continued relationship in the Del Paso Heights community.
Using a solidarity economics framework allows the benefit to be felt by everyone involved and leaves communities feeling strong, proud, empowered, and engaged.
It's very excited to see the start of the project all the way until the end of the project. You know, I was working with one particular family, and it's always a success story to me, and I love sharing the story. I had a family that came in. They heard about the homeownership opportunity and the workshops that Mutual Assistance Network was hosting. They knew that they were not ready for it, but they were interested, and that was one of their dreams, is because they have families that are invested in this neighborhood, and their hope was to become homeowners. I worked with them a little bit over a year because they needed to work on their credit score. After a year into getting and explaining, educating them about the homeownership process, getting them connected to a lender, as well as getting them connected to the builders, a year and a half later, they were able to get their keys. And so it was very, very rewarding to see the whole process. It wasn't like a quick fix, like, hey, you're interested, apply for a loan. This family had a lot of challenges getting there. And so it took a little bit over a year for them to finally get their key. And that really paved the way for many of the other family members and for the children that homeownership is possible.
Doing this kind of work for Alianza was a manifestation of what is possible. People who work in Alianza, we're very fortunate because we're community members too. We just work in a nonprofit, and that brings a lot of resources. We didn't know anything about foundations. We just knew our experience, which is a lot, and the tools that we gained through advocating with the community is that we learned the same thing that they did because we're a community. We just have a different role. The relationship that we have with the community is that that's my dad, that's my mom, that's my niece and nephew, that's the person I went to high school with. And because of opportunities that were only selected for the few, that some of us had the opportunity to go to college and return home and see home as an opportunity to see change.